For 3 months, there was no growth of the tumours, so we thought that that was pretty good. But he lost a lot of weight because we didn't know enough about the diet. There wasn't the information around. So he became bedridden and was in a lot of pain. And for so many, and I think this is still pertinent today, the pain became the illness. And our focus was actually taken off dealing with cancer, and it was actually dealing with this pain, which was unrelenting. And as it turned out, it was not so much physical pain, but emotional, psychological, spiritual pain of the imminent demise that he thought he might be facing. Because guess what? Dogs get osteogenic sarcoma too. Large breeds of dog, actually like St. Bernards, Rottweilers, actually have this as a genetic propensity in the line. And what had we done in our years into practice? We had euthanized, put them to sleep, dogs who had had this illness. So he had in himself such a negative imprint of the outcome of the illness. And that proved to be a really very major thing for him to work with throughout the whole of his recovery, because he half believed he could get well. He half had faith he could get well, but he knew that these dogs didn't, and that they'd met their demise. So working with the pain became an issue. We tried acupuncture. When we tried acupuncture, the person who was teaching the meditation said, I don't want you to do anything else other than the meditation. You don't come back here. So we moved out of doors, medical doors, alternative doors, complementary doors, and we found that there was nowhere like a haven. There was nowhere where you could come and under one roof get all the care and the support and the literature that you needed to actually put together your own healing map. In those days, we put it together from wherever we could find it and did the best. Things actually got a little worse. One of the tumours that was in his groin moved across, blocked off a ureter, and his kidney began to swell, and they said to me, 2 or 3 weeks. Just put up with the pain if you can, take the morphine, and when he's ready to come back in, we'll put him in a hospice and see you later. Well, I still didn't think this was a very good idea. And I like a challenge. Scorpio, I like a challenge. And here was this challenge, and he decided he'd have some radiotherapy, which was recommended to relieve the pain. It didn't, but on the way home from the hospital, he proposed in the back of the car. He said, I think it's time we got married. This is interesting, he's just sort of been given this prognosis. So we went home and we organised this incredible, almost shotgun wedding for a person who was clearly dying with cancer at that point. And you can imagine what our friends were like, because they all thought they'd come to this premature wake. And we have some of the most depressing wedding photos that you could ever want to see. We're sort of smiling and happy. He's 6.5 stone, he's jaundiced, he's got this thing growing everywhere, and we're there, they're smiling, and there's all these depressed people in the background. And they are really, really quite something. A friend who came to that wedding suggested to us that we might like to think of going to the Philippines. I thought, not a bad place for a honeymoon. So I can do this, we can do this. And we got a letter for him to travel, and we headed off to the Philippines, again, not really knowing what we were doing and where we were going specifically, and went to see some of the psychic healers there. Something very interesting happened. He went to the Philippines as a man clearly dying of cancer, and he accepted it mentally. What happened was, during the process of the healing, and it was not so much what people actually did to him in that sense, it was the psychological shift that was able to be made. They re-engaged his spirit. They re-engaged his passion for living. They gave him hope. They gave him possibilities. The staff would come to the door of our little homestay hotel. They'd bring organic food. They were making juices through the meat mincer and squeezing it out through cloth so that they could help him. They were praying every night at the chapel when they left work. And they'd come to the door and they'd say, it's okay, missus, don't you worry, he'll be fine. And so we had gone from this negative environment into this incredibly positive one. And that made all the difference. He went with 2 weeks to live. We stayed a month. That's pretty good. He was a stone heavier. All his pain had gone, but he still had cancer. And it still kept growing. But the difference was here, and it's a really very important point, that he was at that point where he left the man dying with cancer and became a man living well with cancer. And that's a part of that continuum. It's a part of the process. There's no magic bullets, I don't believe, in complementary and alternative medicine, just like there's no magic bullets for this in mainstream medicine. But the transition that you make is a part of the process, it's a part of the continuum of healing. So what happened, we did 31 different things in the next 2.5 to 3 years. 31 different things, different approaches, even a little bit of chemotherapy when it was necessary. We kept in touch with the medical people. We had x-rays to kind of prove what was going on, but also so that we knew whether we were winning, whether we were losing, or whether we were standing still. So diagnostics become a very important part in this process as well. So as this time moved on, we did these 31 different approaches, he got to a point where he was a person living so well with cancer, he was able to go back to work as a vet, sitting on a stool, doing small animal practice, and he still had these tumours, and they'd grown. By this stage, a bread and butter plate size, here on his chest, and in his lung, half of his left lung was now bone. The tumour here was about the size of a grapefruit. So we were doing something right. There was a missing, but there was this missing ingredient. And I always say to people now, with my now 27 years of experience since these times, you never know where your healing is going to come from. So one of the most important things is to keep the hope alive, to keep on keeping on, to live day by day by day, and incorporate the things that you want to put into your healing program without desperation. And if you just keep doing that, you never know. It could be a new chemotherapy, it could be a new hormonal treatment. And in his case, it was tuberculosis that actually cleared the tumour from the lung and on the chest. Now, a lot of people have actually misread our history and misreported our history in that. He was lucky, he had TB and cancer at the same time. And when remission day came, because all these tumours suddenly started disappearing, he started coughing up bone. Little bits of gravel, little bits of coral was being coughed up. And he was coughing up quite a lot of blood with that as well. And we thought, oh, well, yes, if you're coughing up bone, it seems quite normal, you're going to cough up some blood with it. What we didn't know, there was TB there. And so remission day came, and the fellow who we went to, fortunately, oncologist, had worked at the Marsden here in the days when TB was quite ripe. And he said, well, I've got the good news and the bad news from people. We said, good news first, please. Of course. And he said, the good news is your lung's clear. There's a huge lung abscess there, but there's no bone. He said, this is remarkable. I've never seen anything like it on the comparatives of 2.5 years of x-rays before. Well, we thought, what could the bad news be after that? So the bad news is you've got TB. It's very active, it's systemic, and you've had it for at least 2.5 years. And probably picked it up in the Philippines. Healing that just comes, you know, as I said, from out of left field. You never know. And it appears that those two illnesses actually did battle. And it was so advanced, it was a really, it's called osteopulmonary arthropathy, which is a very long name, but it really means that the TB is in the circulation and it's also in the joints. So he had this enormous boost of his immune system when the TB had cleared out the cancer. And then he went to Main Street and they gave him some nice drugs, some rifampicin and some other drugs. He was treated normally, and that was the end of the story. And he's remained well since.